Here's Josephus, handsome fellow, right? That's an image that somebody gave us. Most of these would be idealized like airbrushed photos are now. But this is going to help us with what the power of Parresia is and the dynamic of it, because this is kind of a cool scene, right? These fishermen come up with Parresia, and we want to know why that's important. This is going to be about Herod as Herod gets worse. Herod the Great did magnificent things. He funded the rebuilding of the temple and the ornate and sort of fabulous way in which the temple was added onto and restored. He he was known as a fair ruler for a lot of his life. He was called Herod the Great. As he got older, he got worse by almost all accounts. And so this part of Antiquities narrates that time when Herod is getting worse. And it comes at a time when he's treating his sons terribly. He wound up killing his sons. He's very paranoid. Now, as Herod and the gang came to Caesarea, everybody was there talking of Herod's sons, and the kingdom was in suspense, and the people in great expectation of what would become of them, for a terrible fear seized upon all people, lest the ancient disorders of the family should come to a sad conclusion. They were in great trouble about their sufferings. Nor was it without danger to say any rash thing. Now, notice, if you speak out under Herod, there's danger in the air about this matter, a rash thing about this matter, nor even to hear another saying it. So you can't even listen to people who are saying things against Herod. But men's pity was forced to be shut up in themselves, which rendered the excess of their sorrow very irksome. This is a 1700s translation, which is I gave you because it's kind of fun. But very silent, yet was there an old soldier of Herod's whose name was Tero. Tero had fought battles with Herod, and he had a son of the same age as Herod's son Alexander. So they knew each other, and they were probably about the same age themselves. And here it comes. He was so very free as openly to speak out what others silently thought about the matter, and was forced to cry out often among the multitude, and said, here, I got to move something. He said in the most unguarded manner that truth was perished, justice taken away from people, lies and ill will prevailed, and brought such a mist before the public affairs that the offenders were not able to see the greatest mischiefs that can befall them. Right? As he was so bold, parrhesiazomai, that's the verb for parrhesia, he seemed not to have kept himself out of danger by speaking so freely, but the reasonableness of what he said moved people to regard him as having behaved himself with the great manhood, or courage, probably is the better word. And this at a proper time also, for which reason everyone heard what he said with pleasure. So far, Tiro has spoken to the public and called out the evil and injustice that's going on by Herod. Nobody else would. Everybody else is scared spitless. He speaks out and says, this is just wrong, when nobody else would speak. It's called parrhesia. And they receive it kindly. And the word that gets used again, the great freedom he took, parrhesia. For the expectation they were in of so great an affliction, put a force upon them to speak of Tero whatsoever they pleased. So they were happy to hear from Tiro, and word got around. So, back here. This man had thrust himself into the king's presence. So what he was speaking before was out on the square. Now he's in with the great Herod himself, and he's thrust himself there with the greatest freedom, parrhesia, and desired to speak with him by himself alone, which the king permitted him to do, where he said this: since I am not able, O king, to bear up under so great a concern as I am under, I have preferred the use of this bold liberty, parrhesia, that I now take, which may be for thy advantage, if thou mindest to get any profit by it, before mine own safety. So he's valuing the public good over his own safety, and he speaks boldly and courageously at his own risk, right? The people love him for it, but he's putting his life on the line. Whither, king, is thy understanding gone? Where has your mind gone and left your soul empty? Where is that extraordinary wisdom of yours? Where is it gone? Whereby you performed so many and such glorious actions. These words the king heard, and for some time with good temper. So far, freedom of speech, which is what parresia means, his willingness to speak his mind is going pretty well for Tiro. But now the minor key comes. But what can one say? When Tiro plainly touched upon the bad behavior and perfidiousness of his domestics, he was moved at it. But Tiro went on farther, and by degrees he used an unbounded military parresia. In other words, he let it all go. And nor was he so well disciplined as to accommodate himself to the time, which means he didn't read the room. So Herod was greatly disturbed, and seeming to be rather reproached by this speech than to be hearing what was for his advantage, he learned thereby that both the soldiers abhorred the things he was about, and the officers didn't like it. He gave order that all whom Tiro had named, and Tiro himself, should be bound and kept in prison. The rest is ugly. The rest is Tiro getting arrested, his sons getting arrested, everybody who's spoken against him getting arrested, and all of them getting killed. Right? This is Herod at his worst. But I want to do the anatomy of this exchange because it helps us understand what's going on with the apostles before the Sanhedrin. Remember now, the Sanhedrin are the people who sent Jesus to crucifixion, sent him to Pilate, who sent him to crucifixion. So they are powerful people, the most powerful Jews in the land. Peter and John are stood up in front of him just having gotten out of overnight jail. And you would expect quivering knees, but Peter comes up with this parresia, this bold speech that even accuses the leaders again in his speech. In the Roman Empire, in Greco-Roman times, parresia started out as free speech in Athens, which meant a sort of political free speech, where everybody was allowed to speak their mind. It probably didn't always it probably wasn't always carried out. But the idea was everybody is allowed to speak their mind, right? That was in a political setting. But then the democracy of Athens went away, and then the Republic of Rome went away, and now we're under an empire, and everything changes. Because now the only safe place for parresia is with a friend who is wise enough that when you tell her she has spinach in her teeth, she actually thanks you for it, right? Friendship is one of the places where we speak freely if we trust that the person who's our friend will actually take it well, right? That was true in antiquity. Parresia would be, I see this going on in your life, and I don't like it for you, and I don't like it for the people around you, and sort of a corrective speech. And good friends, wise people, said, thank you. Now, of course, not many of us like to hear criticism. So sometimes people didn't take this parresia very well, but friendship was a place where it was supposed to be welcomed. The dangerous place to speak your mind was with powerful people. But it became a heroic trait. It became the embodiment of courage during this period, because there were a lot of tyrants running around, a lot of people with a lot of power who would just slay anybody who opposed them, right? It became a heroic philosophical thing to do, to stand up before kings, emperors, and speak your mind, speak against their abuses. Now let's go back into the room that Peter and John are standing in with the Sanhedrin. Luke knows that whole setting I've just given you, and so do a lot of Luke's readers. And so as they watch, they're marveling, along with the Jewish leaders, at how these fishermen are coming up with bold courage. And the reason for the marveling is that the only way you were supposed to become courageous among educated minds in antiquity was if you went to school and studied enough to keep your passions at bay, right? So you learned to be good by studying philosophy, by studying in school. You got to be good because you learned reason over passion, and you were able to contain your impulses, right? You were able to become courageous in hard situations because you had trained yourself against running away scared, right? So across the empire, people of any education thought, well, the way to get courageous is to get more educated. But here are two uneducated guys. They're fishermen who probably couldn't read and write, but at least had never been trained in the ways that you would get courageous from. And here they are doing this Parresia thing, and nobody expects it. So the Sanhedrin is amazed because they're able to come up with this kind of virtuous courage without its usual source. And notice then that the Sanhedrin members say, these guys must have been with Jesus. They attribute it to Jesus's influence. It's not about which psalm Peter quoted, although that's kind of cool. It's about how these guys who haven't been educated somehow found their way to this and are attributing it to the Holy Spirit. They said that sounds so much like that Jesus guy.